Hello, friends. In this episode, we're going back to a quiet summer afternoon in 1988. School's over for the day. The sun is still warm outside, and there are still a few good hours left before dinner. Inside Tommy's room, the television is already on. The box fan is turning in the corner, and a few Nintendo cartridges are waiting on the carpet. So get comfortable, slow down, and let yourself drift back to a time when an ordinary afternoon could feel endless. By 4:30, the whole street had settled into that quiet part of a summer weekday when school was over and the evening had not started yet. The sun was still bright, but softer now. It rested across the front lawns in broad, warm pieces, turning the sidewalks pale and the parked cars slightly golden. Two bicycles were already lying in Tommy's yard. One of them still had its front wheel turning a little, as if it had been dropped only a moment ago. Farther down the block, a lawnmower droned on and off. Not loud enough to disturb anything, just another sound folded into the afternoon. Birds moved in the trees without much urgency. Nothing outside seemed rushed. Inside Tommy's house, everything felt cooler and dimmer. The front hallway smelled faintly of sneakers, old carpet, and the still air of a house closed against the summer heat. Tommy's backpack had been dropped by the door in a shape that showed he had barely taken it off before heading straight to his room. One notebook corner stuck out. Homework belonged to some later part of the day, maybe after dinner. Maybe not at all. For now, the afternoon still felt wide open, and that alone was enough to make everything feel easy. Tommy's room was at the end of the hall. The door was open. The television was already on. That was always one of the best things. Walking into a room where the TV was already humming. The set sat on a wooden stand that had probably belonged somewhere else in the house before it became a TV stand. It was heavy, with a curved screen and a soft electronic hum that blended into the room the same way the box fan did. Under it sat the Nintendo, the front-loading kind every kid knew how to handle by feel. Near the console, on the carpet, a loose half-circle of cartridges had already formed. Contra, Jackal, Russian Attack, Life Force. A couple of sports games rested off to the side, with much less dignity, the kind of cartridges nobody reached for unless every other possibility had been exhausted. The room had the ordinary richness of a kid's bedroom that was used every day. A box fan sat in the corner, making a low, steady whir with a little rattle in it. A row of cassette tapes leaned against a shelf. Action figures stood near the window in no real order. A game magazine with bent corners and a curling cover lay face down beside the bed. Sunlight entered through the window at an angle and made a long gold shape on the carpet. Dust drifted slowly through the beam. Outside the window, the lawn looked bright and still. A sidewalk ran past the yard and disappeared behind a maple tree whose leaves barely moved. It was the kind of suburban view children almost never noticed while they were living inside it. Years later, it would become exactly the kind of thing they would remember. Tommy was crouched in front of the Nintendo, one hand on the cartridge door, doing the careful little routine that belonged to that machine and that machine alone. Push the cartridge in, press it down, power on. If the screen blinked wrong, try again. Maybe not harder, just differently. Every kid knew there was a feel to it. A second later, the screen held steady. That was enough. The afternoon seemed to click into place around that one detail. The television glowed. The fan turned. The room felt claimed. Outside, a bike rolled up the driveway and stopped. Then another. Voices drifted in from the front of the house, easy and familiar. Tommy did not need to leave the room to check. Danny and Max were here. Danny came in first, thin, alert, and already looking toward the television before he had fully stepped inside. He always seemed to arrive carrying some small piece of game information from somewhere else. A school rumor, a cousin's claim, something from a magazine rack, something someone swore had worked once at a sleepover. He was not loud about it. He just liked knowing things. Max came in after him with the unhurried confidence of being older by 1 year, which at that age felt like a real advantage. Max loved home games, but he still measured them against arcade machines. If a game reminded him of something at the mall or the convenience store, he said so. If it looked almost arcade perfect for even a second, he respected it. Nobody made much of an entrance. They just folded naturally into the room. One dropped to the carpet. One leaned against the bed. One picked up a cartridge and turned it over to read the label. Not because he needed to, but because it felt good to hold a game before playing it. Jackal ended up in Max's hand. He looked at it, then at Tommy. "This one first." Tommy glanced over from the television. "Yeah." "Then Contra." Danny crouched near the cartridges. "Chris said there's another code for Contra." Max gave a quiet little snort. "There's always another code for Contra." Danny smiled. "Not just the regular one. Something else." That was how game talk worked a lot of the time back then. Not arguments exactly, more like a chain of half-believed stories moving from one kid to another, changing shape as they went. By the time a cheat reached your school, it could sound like a secret known only to one kid in another district, whose older brother had somehow seen everything first. Tommy slid Jackal into the console. The plastic clicked into place. The fan turned in the corner. Somewhere in the kitchen, a cabinet opened and closed. A spoon touched a glass. His mother was moving around quietly, beginning dinner without needing to announce anything. Her presence stayed in the background of the house in the way only parents in a calm home sometimes could, not interrupting the afternoon, only holding it together from somewhere else. When the game started, the three boys leaned in the way kids always did, even when they knew the opening well. Jackal had that immediate feeling of motion. Instead of a lone character running across the screen, it gave them a jeep. Small, quick, and always moving forward. That alone made it feel a little different from the other cartridges by the TV. Two-player play made the screen busier in a good way. The top-down movement gave it a sense of freedom, as if the game were less about surviving a straight path and more about slipping through danger carefully. Tommy took the first turn. Max watched with his arms resting on his knees. Danny picked up the magazine by the bed and started turning pages without really reading all of them. There was something comfortable about the first part of a game session. Nobody felt the need to talk constantly. One person played. One person watched closely enough to feel nearly responsible for the mistakes. One person let his attention drift between the screen and the room itself. The cartridges waiting on the carpet. The sunlight slowly shifting. The fan. The magazine. The open window view. The simple feeling that dinner was still far away. Max said, "You always save the grenades too long." Tommy gave a slight smile without looking back. "Maybe." Danny kept flipping through the magazine. "There's a page in here about life force." "Salamander," Max said. "It says life force." Still Salamander. That was another small ritual. The North American release said life force, But Max liked Salamander better because it sounded stranger, and maybe because some game names felt more exciting when they seemed to come from somewhere slightly farther away. Tommy lost a life and handed over the controller without ceremony. The cord slid across the carpet. Danny set the magazine down and took his turn. His hands were lighter on the buttons, more economical somehow. He liked to figure things out. Tommy liked to push forward. Max liked to comment from the side as if he were quietly in charge of quality control for all home gaming. The room stayed easy. The fan kept turning. The TV glow held steady. The lawnmower outside finally stopped. The quiet after it felt even softer. Sunlight shifted another inch across the room. The open can of soda Tommy had brought in started to gather a little ring of moisture at the bottom. A bowl of chips sat on the floor between them. Nobody bothered with napkins. By the time they switched from Jackal to Contra, the afternoon had settled into itself completely. Contra had a different kind of feeling from the moment it began. More direct, more focused. But in Tommy's room, even that sharper energy softened into familiarity. The boys knew the opening stretch well enough to talk over it without losing track. Contra was the kind of game that made everyone sit a little straighter, not because it felt stressful, because it felt satisfying. The kind of challenge that was hard enough to matter, but fair enough to come back to again and again. Danny entered the code carefully at the title screen. Not with drama, just with the quiet seriousness children give to things they know matter. Up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start. He did not say it aloud. He did not need to. Max watched the title screen change and nodded once. Better. That was the kind of moment that made a room feel rich in a way adults rarely understood. Not because it was huge, just because shared knowledge felt good. The code was part of the game now, part of the ritual, part of playing it properly with friends. They played in pairs, trading off after a few lives, never in a strict order. Tommy liked the forward push of Contra. Danny liked the patterns. Max liked spotting the best weapon drop and speaking up half a second too late. Spread. I know. You missed it. I know. The comments were brief and soft, never sharp. Then the room would go quiet again except for the game music, the tapping of buttons, and the small household sounds drifting in from other parts of the house. After a while, Danny, still watching the screen, said, "My brother saw big." Tommy asked, "Was it good?" He said it was funny. Max said, "That's the one where the kid wakes up grown up." Danny nodded. Yeah, that was how movie talk entered the room too. Not in long discussions, just in short remembered pieces, traded the same way game rumors were traded. Tommy lost another life and passed the controller to Max. Max sat a little closer to the screen. Not enough to be told to back up, but enough that it was possible. Roger Rabbit came out too. Danny said, "Chris saw that one." "Everybody says it's good." Tommy reached for another chip. "That one looks weird." "Good weird," Max said. A little later, Danny said, "Willow too." Tommy looked toward the magazine on the floor. "That's the sword one, right?" Max kept playing. "Yeah." The conversation did not stay on movies for long. It never needed to. The room was not built for analysis. It was built for passing impressions around while one thing or another continued on the screen. As the afternoon moved closer to evening, they changed games again. Russian Attack was the cartridge Tommy still sometimes called Green Beret, mostly because that name sounded more serious. Compared with Contra, it felt more stripped down, more direct, running, jumping, attacking, always moving forward. the sort of game that seemed older somehow, even while they were still playing it in that same summer. Max held the controller for that one and played with a kind of straight-backed concentration, as if the game demanded less conversation and more respect. Danny sat with the magazine open across his lap, not reading now, only resting his hands on the pages. Tommy got up once to stretch and stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the yard. The light outside had changed. It was still bright, but softer now, lower, less wide. The bikes in the grass were no longer shining. Shadows from the trees had lengthened across the sidewalk. The neighborhood had that early evening calm before people started appearing again for errands, for dinner, for bringing things inside. From the kitchen came the smell of something beginning to cook. Nothing dramatic, just the familiar smell of dinner existing somewhere else, being made by someone else, while the afternoon inside Tommy's room kept going a little longer. Tommy's mom appeared briefly in the doorway, not stepping all the way in. "You boys want popsicles?" They all said yes in different levels of politeness. A few minutes later, she left a box on the dresser with the easy efficiency of someone who knew exactly how summer afternoons worked. The boys unwrapped them without stopping the game. For a minute, the room felt colder from the sweet artificial chill of the popsicles. Then it returned to its fan-cooled warmth. When they finally put in life force, the room had already begun to dim. That game always changed the mood a little. Even before anyone said anything, it had a bigger feeling. The shifting movement, side to side and then downward, made it seem larger than the room, like it came from somewhere more complicated. Playing together added to that feeling too. One ship alone looked good. Two together looked important. Danny and Tommy took the first run while Max watched from the floor, elbows on knees, a half-finished popsicle stick resting between his fingers. "Narrow there," he said once. Danny tilted slightly with the controller, the way players do when the body wants to help the machine. "I know." The TV glow had become stronger now that the room itself was darker. The patch of sunlight on the carpet was gone. The fan still turned. Outside, a dog barked once, and then stopped. Somewhere, a screen door opened and closed. The house around them felt quieter than it had earlier, settled into evening. That was often the best part of a day like this. Not the beginning, when everyone was still arriving. Not the middle, when there were too many choices. The later part, when the room had accepted its own shape and everything inside it seemed to belong exactly where it was. 3 boys, 1 TV, a few soda cans, chips gone except for crumbs at the bottom of the bowl, melted popsicle wrappers on the dresser, the magazine still open to a page nobody had looked at for 20 minutes, bicycles outside on the lawn, a mother in the kitchen. Evening taking its time. The game sessions grew a little quieter as the light went down. They were not tired exactly, just settled. Max lay back against the side of the bed. "Double Dragon's still better in the arcade." Danny answered, "Maybe." Tommy, still looking at the screen, said, "Everything's better in the arcade." That felt true enough that nobody tried to improve on it. For a little while after that, there was hardly any conversation at all, just game sounds, button taps, the small mechanical noises of the room, and the occasional comment when somebody noticed a weapon, or a pattern, or a mistake that had almost been avoided. Tommy's mother called down the hall that dinner would be a little while yet. That was good news in the most ordinary possible way. It meant they still had time for one more round of Contra before anyone had to think about going home. So Contra came back out. The familiar cartridge, the familiar title screen, the familiar code, the familiar satisfaction of getting it right. By then, the room was dim enough that the television had become the clearest thing in it. The blue-white of the screen reflected faintly in the wood of the stand and on the curve of the soda cans. Outside the window, the lawn had dulled into evening green. The sidewalk was gray now. The bikes were darker shapes. One porch light on the street had come on. Inside the room, time had slowed into something almost perfect. The boys were still talking now and then, but softly and mostly in fragments. Spread. Got it. Watch the top. I see it. Try the bridge again. No one was in a hurry to finish. No one needed to say that aloud. The beauty of a summer afternoon like that was never in one huge moment. It was in the way everything stayed gently connected. The room, the games, the chips, the movie talk, the fan, the kitchen sounds, the lowering sun, the bikes left outside, the comfort of not yet having to leave. At 12 and 13, they would not have described it that way. They would only have known that it felt good, and that they wanted it to last another hour, then another. Eventually, one of them would have to go home first, then the others a little later. The cartridges would be stacked again. Not neatly, but well enough. The soda cans would be gathered. Someone would remember the magazine and toss it onto the shelf. Tommy's mother would call once more, and this time it really would mean the day was turning. But not yet. For a few more minutes, the room remained exactly as it was supposed to be. The fan turned in the corner. The television hummed. The controller cords crossed the carpet. The house stayed cool and safe around them. And outside, summer evening waited quietly on the other side of the window. It was only an ordinary afternoon. That was the whole beauty of it. Nothing enormous had happened, no great victory, no dramatic surprise, no story anyone would have thought to write down. Just boys in a bedroom in the summer of 1988, getting a little better at Contra, talking about movies they had seen or meant to see, arguing softly about game names and arcade versions, and stretching the afternoon as long as it would go. Years later, if any of them remembered it, they would probably remember it in pieces. The hum of the TV before the game began, the feel of a cold soda can against the palm, the patch of sunlight on the carpet, the box fan turning in the corner, the sound of someone in the kitchen touching a spoon to a glass, the easy certainty that there was still time before dinner. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything, because some memories do not stay large. They stay gentle. A room, a season, a game, a little light still left outside, and the quiet feeling, difficult to explain and impossible to replace, of being a child at the end of a summer afternoon with good friends nearby and the evening not quite ready to begin.